Hi everyone, I thought it was time I did another vlog since we're currently in quarantine at the moment and I have a little more time than usual, so I've been filming some stuff to show you. I don't really want to talk too much about coronavirus and the current situation just because it's all we're hearing about at the moment. But obviously I'll talk about it a little as it affects all of us. It affects the stuff I sometimes talk about on the vlog, like how I make my living and stuff like that. So it's times like this that I kind of appreciate having more than one job. Because if something happens to one of my jobs, I have other stuff going on as well. And so far my publishing work is unaffected. In fact, I'm busier than usual just at the moment. I'm busier right now than I have been throughout this year so far. Partly because there's a lot of reshuffling going on to adjust to the current situation. But I'm very happy to have that job. The theatre closed down mid-March, which I was very happy about. I mean, I'm not happy for all the people that are now struggling, but I was getting, by the point it was getting quite bad, I was getting worried about my housemate who has an autoimmune condition and so is in the at-risk group. And so I wasn't very happy that I was going into work at one of the biggest public buildings in London, because I was thinking if there's any place to get infected, it's probably there, where there's thousands of people sort of coming through the doors and members of the public every day. So mid-March, I think what happened was that I heard of the first London theatre shutting down on a Thursday or a Friday. Then the theatre that my friend Becky was working at the time, the Old Vic, that announced, I think over the weekend, that it was closing down, and a few others. And I was kind of constantly checking my email to see when mine was going to close, because I just didn't want to, I felt it was risky to keep going into work considering I live with an at-risk person. But luckily by the Monday, they'd come to that decision. And I'm very lucky. I have a contract there. Most of my colleagues in my department don't. They're casual 0-hour contract workers. So concerned for them. But I know that, the theatre's doing what it can. I think the latest news is that we're being furloughed for May and June, which is fine. There's a government scheme in the UK where we'll get a significant percentage of our wages anyway. Not entirely sure how that relates to the 0 hours people, but I think that will apply to me. We'll have to see, still waiting for confirmation of that. But I mean, they've been very good up until this point. They've paid me my full wage for sort of 6 weeks for doing absolutely nothing, because my job is managing the audience and the building's closed. So, I'm very grateful for that hasn't really impacted my income situation. In terms of my sort of working from home situation and working to my book deadline, it's quite strange, the timing of it, because it's exactly the sort of 3 months that I would have been in a sort of a form of lockdown anyway, staying at home, working flat out hours to kind of meet my book deadline. And the fact that my theatre job's been kind of taken away for those same months, it was going to be April, May, June, is quite lucky in a way. I mean, I've got 12 hours a week extra that I wouldn't have had, although I was planning to use up some annual leave, so I would have taken quite a bit of that time off as holiday. But now that's kind of been lifted off, and it does feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders a little bit. I was behind. I was quite stressed about how I was going to meet the book deadline. So this is actually a great help. I kind of hate to put it in those terms because it's such a horrible situation for a lot of people. But I'm just trying to kind of be grateful for, the good things at the moment. There's a lot of stuff I'm grateful for. I'm really grateful that my partner's medical thing that he had, that I talked about in the last episode, that we'd had that kind of dealt with before all this kicked off, because, we would not have wanted to, I don't even know if we would have been able to get into hospital for his tests and stuff. So I'm very glad that the timing of that was quite lucky. I'm also very grateful that I have my roof garden, my back garden, this outdoor space, which a lot of Londoners don't have, because I really feel like the kind of terrible time anxiety I was having has kind of been lifted a little bit. I've been making the most of that. I've been doing lots of gardening. I've got a little bit of stuff I've filmed to show you about that. It's good exercise, it's nice to be outdoors, and there was a lot that needed doing. I know in the last episode of the vlog I showed you that my gutter was overflowing in the rain. I cleared that out. I mean, the back garden still doesn't look great because it's a work in progress, but I'm going to show it to you anyway, because then I think I'll be even more excited to show it to you when it starts to actually look nice. So I've had some sessions. I've weeded my roof garden. That was quite overgrown. The back and front gardens were kind of not as bad as they have been in the past. There was a lot of dock that I've kind of dug up, and I've planted a lot of seeds out and then moved a lot of plants from the roof down to the back garden to try and fill in the flower beds down there a little bit. So I'll show you some of that in a bit. At the moment I'm actually exercising more than I ever have, I think. I'm doing 2 sessions on my exercise bike a day, and while I do that quite regularly, the fact of going to work at the theatre for those 12 hours a week, working late nights, the commute, all that stuff kind of tires me out a lot. So I'm not always able to exercise as much as I would like. I mean, it's a form of exercise. It gets me up and walking about and out of the house. But in a way, I think the exercise I'm doing at home is probably more beneficial to me and doing it more regularly. I've also just been enjoying, I was sort of texting my friend who I cook a lot with, about this. I've just been enjoying the pressure being off and just allowing me to spend a bit more time cooking. I mean, there are meals that I've made where I've thought usually I would skip this step because I'm rushed and I'm tired and I've got to get it done, in as short a space of time as possible. It's quite nice to have that feeling of, well, no, I could just take my time a little bit, and just enjoy the fact that I'm not going to have to work, draw my book through evenings and weekends for the next 3 months. I can take it a little bit slower. That's a huge relief to me at the moment. I have had a few people sort of close to me who have contracted the virus and have had a horrible, horrible time of it. So that has made it seem very close to home and quite scary, but luckily they're all doing better now. But it's been quite interesting to hear that inside, account of what it's actually been like. It's been quite strange. We've been out to the shops a couple of times, just being as quick as we can and grabbing the stuff that we need. And it is quite surreal. Everyone outside is wearing gloves and masks at the moment. We don't have any, so we've just been going out and trying to not touch anything. But yeah, it's quite a surreal experience. I filmed a tiny bit out in the street the other day, but I didn't really want to film too much. One interesting thing that I did film, there's a really gorgeous cherry tree right outside my studio window, out the front of the house, and every spring it gets covered in gorgeous blossom. And I set up the camera to do a time lapse of that tree on the very day that the government announced the lockdown, and it's quite interesting to see how much activity is still going on in the street. I mean, it wasn't announced, I think, until later in the day. But still, we were being encouraged to stay at home, and there were so many people, stopping and chatting in the street outside, so many people walking around. So that's kind of interesting. I'll show you that in a minute. I'm also grateful for the fact that just psychologically, I am very well suited to this sort of situation, because I don't get cabin fever. I just don't experience that because I love being in my cabin. I love being at home. I always have. Maybe not when I was really young, like a teenager, but certainly now I really love it, and I love spending time in my garden and just being at home. A lot of my friends are really struggling with not being able to go out and about, and I do have a lot of sympathy for that. And I'm just grateful that it's not something that any of us, the 3 people that live in the house with me, we're all kind of the same type of personality. We just love being left to our own devices. So in a sense, it's kind of, we're grateful to have that particular side to our personalities. And also in terms of spending time outdoors, it's not yet in the UK at the sort of temperature that I really enjoy being outdoors. It's still pretty cold. The other day it even snowed for a few minutes. There was a kind of hailstorm and then it snowed a tiny bit. It's supposed to be up to 20 within a few days, I think, which is kind of extraordinary. But yeah, I haven't been suffering with that thing of wanting to be outdoors a lot because it's not really yet warm enough for me. I have sat outside a little bit and it's been really peaceful up on my roof. When the neighbours are quiet, it's really peaceful up there. I did a little bit of filming to show you. I've also made a tiny bit of progress on the knitting project I mentioned in the last episode, the cardigan that I'm knitting as a gift. Learning a new technique in tarsia. I'm really enjoying working on it. It's a fun one. State of this is my fern, and it's been totally overgrown by whatever this is, so I need to get rid of all of that. So I'm out in the garden today. I'm going to show you some of what we're doing out here. I can't remember if I showed it on the vlog before, but I've got a photo taken from up on the roof where we sit that shows what the garden was like before we started working on it. Basically every year it used to be kind of shoulder height brambles, nettles, all those kind of really difficult to get rid of plants and weeds that would just fill the whole garden. And we never really knew what to do with it apart from every so often just clear it down to the ground, and then you'd just be left with kind of bare soil. And every so often different housemates would try and do something with it and just get discouraged. So this is certainly the furthest we've got with it so far. Behind me you can see the little lawn that we've got going. It's pretty uneven. We thought when we'd started that we managed to get it quite level, but we obviously didn't. But it's still better than nothing, and it means that we can kind of come out here and walk about and not have to wade through shoulder high weeds. And the main job now is to fill in around the edges, the flower beds, with some new plants and flowers. And because we're not really going out much at the moment, I'm trying to make do with what I have already. And we're going to oversow some of the more bald patches in the lawn with grass seed to try and get it more even. So today we finally cut the grass for the first time this year, and got some tulips coming up over there, and I've planted out a few other plants. And my lovely friend Rupa gave me some California poppy seeds, which I'm about to sow. So this is where the garden starts. That's the door from our kitchen, and here's the garden path. I'd like to get some stuff growing along here, but it gets absolutely no sun, so I'll have to find some plants that don't mind that. It's all very clear up until this little section, this kind of pointless bit of path here, which is just very tempting to hide stuff in that we don't want to look at, so we have to deal with that. In the course of clearing this garden, there's been so much rubble that we've come across. I don't even know why that's been there, but we have to try and find a way to get rid of that and make it as clear as this bit now is. I think I remember showing on the vlog before when this was piled high with bags of garden waste, so this bit at least is done now. One thing we have a lot of in the garden is ivy. We had a lot growing up the front of the house as well last year, which we've cleared away because it was starting to come through the closed windows, and it's quite nice the way it covers up fences and things, but it gets out of control quite fast. So last year we cleared a lot off this fence and also off this back fence, and the gardeners at the estate on the other side also cleared some from their side and managed to rip 2 of the fence panels out. So just today I've done a kind of temporary fix with some bits of wood that we had lying around, and I'm just hoping we can grow some plants across that to kind of cover it up and make a nice border for Sergio's little bug hotel, which I got him for Christmas, which we've just installed, along with his little butterfly house over there, which is quite exciting. We're going to see if we can get some butterflies coming in. This plant here is a buddleia, which I think butterflies really like, so that's going to be helpful. The problem with that is it grows really fast and it kind of tends to come and hang out over the top of the garden, and we don't get any sun coming in, so we have to keep that kind of cut back into its little corner. This plant here was planted by an old housemate. Every so often people have tried to do something with the garden and then kind of given up, so I'm glad this one survived, but again this one grows really huge, so we have to keep it cut. This one here, these are called copper tips, I think. They have these gorgeous orange flowers in the summer, but again that was getting huge last year, so we cut that back and they're just starting to grow back now. And the most exciting thing is down here. This little plant we bought last year, planted out, and then we moved it because it didn't seem to be doing very well and it died. We thought it had completely died, but this spring it's growing back, so I'm really excited about that. And here's our little lawn, which is a bit patchy, but hopefully will improve. Got some tulips coming up over here, and also over here, so hopefully those are going to start flowering soon. I've also just in the last week planted out loads of seeds around the edges, and also brought some plants down from my roof garden to hopefully start filling out these flower beds a bit. This is a hibiscus, which has never done very well in a pot. We've had it for years and years, it's never flowered, and I think it's just, yeah, it was a bit restricted in the pot, so we're going to try it in the garden. Hopefully that'll be an improvement. And also over here, this is my passion vine, which I've brought down because again that didn't have enough space, I don't think, on the roof to do very much, and it's not looking super healthy, but it has kind of managed to, since I moved it a week ago, it started clinging onto the fence there, so I hope that's a good sign, because it'd be nice to get that to grow out across this fence a little bit. Hi everyone, I'm going to do a little bit of baking today. There's a little bit of adapting, seeing as there are certain ingredients that I can't get hold of at the moment, but that's kind of interesting. It means you can try new things. In week 1 of our quarantine situation, we made some banana bread that came out really nicely. I'd stocked up on some ingredients, it's kind of at the last minute, but plain flour was completely out. We have a lot of bread flour because we bake loaves every week. I'm sure you've seen that on the vlog before. But yeah, I couldn't get hold of any plain flour, so I'm going to see now if I've got just enough to do a second banana bread loaf. But also eggs, haven't been able to get any of those, so I'm trying a different recipe today. As I understand it, eggs in baking are usually to bind the ingredients together, give a little bit of rise and a little bit of fat. In this instance, bananas are actually used in vegan baking a lot to replace egg in terms of binding all the ingredients together, so that part of it is okay. Fat, I have got butter, so I'm going to use butter. You can also use coconut oil as a replacement. And I think to get that little extra bit of rise that the eggs would normally give, I'm going to use a little bit of extra baking powder or baking soda. So we'll see. And it'll be interesting to compare to last week's loaf to see what the difference is. So now I'm just going to measure my flour and see if I've got enough to do this. Excellent, I've got just enough. The other thing you can do is use self-raising flour, and I suddenly remembered I had some at the back of my cupboard, but when I got it out, it's not an ingredient I use very often, and the use by date is September 2013. So I think this is just going to go in the bin. So I think I have all my ingredients measured out now. I have my loaf tin, which has been lined with greaseproof paper. I'm going to mash the bananas now. The recipe calls for 3 medium, but I think these are quite large, so I'm just going to use these 2. I'm also using slightly less sugar than the last loaf we made. My partner's not crazy on super sweet desserts, and he thought it could have done with slightly less sugar. So that's another adjustment I'm making for this one. Right, so there's the mashed banana. Going to add 1/2 cup of milk. A little bit under 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I didn't use this last time, but I'm going to give it a go this time. The recipe also calls for cinnamon, but I think I might leave that out. Just kind of want to see how the taste compares to last time without changing too much in terms of the ingredients. Going to add in my melted butter. Now I've got to add baking powder and baking soda. That's pretty much it. I'll pour it into my loaf tin and get it in the oven, which has been preheating. So here we go, ready to go in the oven. With this size loaf tin, I could really afford to almost double the recipe, but since I don't have enough flour, I'm just going to leave it at this. It'll probably be quite a low loaf, but that's okay. I could also probably get away with using some of my whole wheat bread flour, I'm not sure, but I'm just going to stick with this for now. Okay, time to get the loaf out and see how it's doing. I've got my skewer ready. Wow, this looks really good. It's got more of a rise on it than the last one. I think that's pretty close to being done. I might give it just a couple of minutes for a bit more colour, maybe. So my friend that gave me the California poppy seeds that I showed you also gave me 2 other gifts at the same time, and she insisted that I should mention those in the vlog as well as the seeds. So here they are. These are both recommendations from her own cooking at home of utensils that she finds really useful. This is a microplane for kind of zesting lemons and grating garlic and things. And this is a peeler, and since I'm peeling a butternut squash today, which can be quite a big job, I'm going to try this for the first time. Today I'm making a really easy dinner because it's all stuff that I've taken out of the freezer. I've got some chana sag cooking in the pan. That's a chickpea and spinach curry that I'd already made and I'm defrosting. And I had some naan bread dough also in the freezer, so I'm going to show you how I'm cooking that now. I've got some garlic butter just cooking in this little pan here. And here's my naan dough, which has I think garlic and coriander in it already. Got to get this pan as hot as possible. I'm also going to, once I've cooked them in the pan, char them a little bit on the hob because that gives them a really nice extra bit of flavour. Hey. Alright. Hopefully you can see that that's started to kind of bubble up now. Now I'm going to take this naan and brush it with the garlic butter. This is my first attempt at making a chocolate babka. I've got my dough. It's going to be quite a small babka because I don't have a lot of chocolate. Here's my dough that's been in the fridge overnight. I'm about to roll it out and apply this chocolate filling. So here's my sausage. of dough with chocolate in the middle. I'm going to chill this before I try to shape it, just for maybe 10 minutes. Here we go, I've cut the chilled babka in half and I'm about to braid it and get it into the tin. Now it's got to rise for an hour or an hour and a half, and then it's going to go in the oven. Just got this out of the oven and I'm really excited with how it looks. It rose really well. I've brushed it with a tiny bit of sugar syrup and I'm just going to let it cool a little bit before I take it out of the tin. So now I'm going to show you the knitting project that I've been working on, the cardigan that I'm knitting as a gift. It's going to be, because this has a tendency to roll up, it's going to be quite hard to show it to you. But I'm going to try and unroll it a little bit. So hopefully you can just about see what's going on here. As I mentioned at the start of the vlog, it's colour work with two different techniques going on. If I flip it over, you'll hopefully be able to see this strip along the bottom here is the kind of colourwork knitting that I'm used to doing, which is stranded or fair isle knitting, where the different colours sort of go all the way across the back of the knitting. And this section up here, I've woven in some ends so that it's not super messy, so that hopefully you can see what's going on a bit. This is intarsia up here, and the difference is that instead of all the colours running all the way across, you're sort of knitting in blocks. So this is one block of blue, one block of white, one block of red, and then you're kind of joining a new colour each time you start a new colour in the pattern, which is why when I hold this up, I have all these crazy bits of yarn hanging off the bottom. And even though it's kind of messy, you have to keep untangling these, I'm still kind of enjoying working on this. It's a new technique for me, and I think it's making my colour changes quite neat. I'm really happy with how everything's looking so far. So I had a text message from my mum last night where she was saying she's having a bit of cabin fever and she was asking me how I'm doing. And it really got me thinking, and it made me want to talk about cabin fever a little bit and this sort of isolation that we're all experiencing at the moment due to the pandemic. I was worried that in the bit that I filmed yesterday, the bit to camera that started this episode, that when I said I don't experience cabin fever, that I might have come across kind of smug about that. And it does make me feel kind of guilty to say that that's not something that I struggle with. But then when I was sort of talking to my mum, I was kind of thinking that maybe I shouldn't have to kind of apologise for the fact that I find this kind of social isolation thing that we're going through at the moment, I find it kind of calming and almost a relief. Because for me, I don't mean to downplay the kind of awful stuff that's happening to people all over the world at the moment. I'm just talking about the experience of social isolation. And I know that a lot of my friends are struggling with it. It makes me feel that I must be quite an unusual person or have an unusual psychology to not be bothered by social isolation. It made me kind of think about the fact that I have quite a lot of social phobia, social anxiety. And so to me, usually the experience of leaving the house, especially to go and do social things, it's a stressful thing. It's not something I ever look forward to. It's a strain on me. I have to make myself do it. And so in a sense, this current situation is a kind of relief for me. I really love solitude. I love being by myself. I think I always have, after my teens, when I kind of wanted to be experiencing life and doing things. Now, also, because I live with a partner, that's another factor. If I lived by myself, I'm well aware I would probably be feeling very differently about not being able to go out and see friends and things. And it makes me feel quite guilty to say that as well, because I worry about my friends' feelings. Like, I have such amazing friends who I love and value, from my closest friends to my kind of casual comics buddies in London who I see every so often. So many amazing people that I am really happy that I know. But at the same time, it's just the way my brain is wired that I find it stressful spending time with people, even people that I like. So please don't take it personally if you're a friend of mine. It's just the way my brain is. So I feel like that, like in the same way that some of my friends are really struggling mentally with having to stay indoors, I'm kind of the opposite, and I guess that's okay. And I guess it's okay for me to kind of enjoy the fact that at the moment I don't have to go out and do things. I'm really thankful that I don't, even though I have this social anxiety which is quite strong, I'm grateful that I don't have a sort of generalised anxiety thing that I know a lot of people have, because in this current situation I think if you were prone to sort of catastrophising and general anxiety, I'm sure this is, for people with that, this is a very difficult time. I don't really have that. I'm quite good at, I think my anxieties are quite focused around specific things, and I'm quite good at not letting things in. If I think news and stuff is going to bother me, I just don't look at it, and I don't, I just, to protect my sanity, I'm quite good at blocking things out and just thinking I don't need to be thinking about this right now. I know if I never saw people face to face, that probably would not be very healthy, and it's one of the things I value about my theatre job, is that it makes me go out and sort of meet a lot of people, from my regular colleagues to the customers that I work with at the theatre. And that's something I've always really liked, is meeting a really broad range of people through jobs. I think maybe because there's something casual about the way you interact with people through a job. That's something I've always liked about that, and meeting people from a lot of different backgrounds. And in fact, a lot of these themes can kind of come into the book that I'm working on at the moment, my graphic novel, and I'm wondering whether this is also why this is particularly kind of playing on my mind at the moment. I kind of realised that I'm uncomfortable anytime I have to leave my house in the normal course of events. I really don't, it's not something I ever want to do, which is probably I certainly know that apart from my partner who I live with and my housemate Chris, we're all kind of, I don't know if you'd call us loners, or we like our own company, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Everyone else I know, all my friends that I've been talking to, are really struggling with the fact that they have to stay indoors at the moment. But I kind of pushed myself to think, when do I actually like leaving the house? When am I excited to go out and leave the house? And I realised that really the only time is if I'm going on holiday, or if I'm going travelling, even if it's just around the UK, if it's somewhere I've been before, even like when I go and visit my mum in Scotland, because it's a break from routine, and I get to do some of the things I really love, which is see new places, walking. I know I have a lot of friends that are struggling with not being able to walk. For me, that's not an issue in London, because I don't enjoy walking in the city at all. I love walking in kind of wilderness surroundings, in nature. So I'm not, in the normal course of my life living in London, I'm not tempted to be outside a lot. The one scenario that I do like going outside and walking around is if it's really sunny, which it's not quite at that time of year yet. And it also made me think, have I ever experienced cabin fever? And I think possibly when I was a teenager, I did. And that's because I had this sense that I should be going out and doing things, I should have an interesting life, I should be having new experiences all the time. And I certainly did that for a time. I had a really interesting time. I travelled a lot. I experienced going to live in a different country. I lived in the Netherlands for a year and a half. And I now kind of have a sense that I don't need to do that anymore. And also I feel like I have to say as well, I understand that I'm very privileged to have a home that I really love. I have by no means had that for most of my adult life. I think I've talked about it a little bit on the vlog. I've always shared my home with other people because I don't make a lot of money. And house sharing, flat sharing can be a bit fraught with difficulty. It doesn't always work very well. And I've had the experience a lot of the time of not being happy where I live, and not having a place that really felt like my own. So one thing I'm very grateful for at the moment is that I do have that right now. And I can't imagine what it's like to be kind of stuck somewhere where you don't feel like it's a nice place to be, or obviously to not have somewhere to live at all. Another thing that some of my friends struggle with is not being able to do cultural stuff. I've got friends that love living in London because they love going to the theatre, they love going to galleries and things. At this point in my life, I love making stuff. I love drawing, I love writing, I love knitting, I love making stuff, but I don't actually consume a massive amount of culture. I think having worked almost 20 years in the theatre, that's probably fulfilled a lot of that need for kind of stories and to be exposed to art and design and kind of performance and stuff. I mean, I have that in my working life all the time, so that's probably why I don't feel a great need to go out and do those things. But I don't like going to art galleries, I don't like going to the cinema. Much happier watching films at home. I love reading, I love podcasts, I love watching stuff on TV. I remember when I was younger, I used to do things a lot of the time just to have something to say if someone asked me what I'd been up to recently. And I would go to all sorts of things that I didn't really want to go to just to have something to talk about. But luckily I've now reached a stage of life where I don't care what people think. If someone asks me what I've been doing and I say literally nothing, or just staying in drawing day after day, that's fine. I don't really care what people think about that. I remember one very specific time actually when I realised that it was maybe okay to embrace my kind of inner hermit nature. I went to a Ladies Do Comics talk. I think it's one of the only ones that I've ever been to in London. Ladies Do Comics is a UK organisation promoting the work of female comic creators, and there are little groups around the whole of the country where they have speakers give talks and you can go along. And I remember hearing an older lady give a talk, and I don't remember her name. It was quite a number of years ago now. And one thing she said that got a really positive response from the audience was that she talked about having the feeling at one point in her life that she didn't have enough time to do creative stuff. And then she said, I just suddenly realised if I start saying no to all the social things that I go to that I don't want to go to, that will free up a lot of time. And so she said, I just stopped going to things and if I didn't want to go. And what really surprised me was that everyone in the audience was really kind of enthusiastic about that and was really behind it. And I kind of thought, oh, okay, so maybe it's not such a sort of unacceptable thing to not want to do social things and to not have to. So that was kind of eye-opening. And I remember walking away from that kind of inspired. But generally, I'm really happy with kind of intermittent contact with friends through texting, WhatsApping. I have friends that I talk to on a daily basis, sometimes all through the day. So that does give me that sort of social contact, even if it's not face-to-face, and I really love that. And I kind of like at the moment how we're doing that a lot more because of the social distancing. Just checking in with people way more than I usually do, and them with me, and that's quite a nice thing, I think. I've really enjoyed that. I've just been enjoying how people have been treating each other with a great deal of kind of consideration at the moment. When my two very good friends of mine were ill with what we assume is coronavirus, they haven't been tested, but they had friends and neighbours dropping off food and drinks outside the door of their flat day after day, and that was really lovely to see. Another thing that I've been enjoying in this situation is people's adaptability and seeing how people are finding new ways to kind of cope. One example that's just off the top of my head at the moment, because I've been listening to it, a friend of mine who I work with at the theatre has been doing a podcast, and it's very, very small scale. He's just emailing his episodes. He's not an especially kind of tech savvy person. So he's been emailing episodes just to a list of friends, and that's been so nice. He's a writer, and I've read a little bit of his writing, but not a lot. And he's doing a podcast reading bits of his writing out. But yeah, I think it's really nice that people are kind of maybe being pushed to try new things by this whole situation. I think it's good if you can try and find something positive out of it. Anyway, that's just my lockdown thoughts. And I really appreciate you watching this, and feel free to comment if you have any thoughts on any of this stuff. Really enjoy hearing comments about the vlog, so yeah, do let me know what you're experiencing and what you're thinking at the moment. Okay, see you soon. Bye.